The moves have been endless in NFL free agency, and today we're going to break it all down. First of all, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Free agency's still continuing. There are guys signing still that are going to make big impacts for whatever team chooses to give them some money. Trades are still happening. And then we've got the draft coming up too. So endless cycle of football news and excitement for a lot of fan bases and maybe some disappointment for some others, which we might get into later.
I say we just hop right in and start with the position that everyone loves to focus on, and that's quarterback. The quarterback carousel, as it's called every year. Wasn't as much movement maybe this year as opposed to other years in the starting department, but a ton of backups on the move, a ton of young quarterbacks traded. But I think today we're going to key in on 4 guys that made moves. Obviously, the biggest fish in Kirk Cousins. Then you got 2 Steelers and Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. That should be an interesting quarterback room. And then Sam Darnold, maybe a bit of an unexpected one. Is he maybe not the long-term solution in Minnesota, but feels like he can be there next year with Kirk Cousins departing. But let's start with Kirk, one of the biggest money moves. He goes to Atlanta, a team that has kind of been lacking in the QB department ever since Matt Ryan left. What do you make of this one?
It's a great move for Atlanta, and I think how we talk about Kirk Cousins is kind of interesting. Like, I feel like a few years ago, maybe not viewed as a top 10 guy. I think he's probably a top 10 guy based on what he showed last year before that awful injury, and hopefully he recovers. But that's also part of this conversation too, is you're hoping that he gets back to 100%. He's obviously up there in age. He's not the most mobile quarterback, but that's still a little bit of a thing you need as a quarterback to maneuver and navigate the pocket. But overall, I mean, new head coach, new OC that he has some familiarity with from that McVay tree. He comes over, Zach Robinson, from the Sean McVay offense and working in LA with the Rams, winning a Super Bowl with them. So that should fit seamlessly. And then you look at the weapons that he's getting. You have Kyle Pitts, a top 10 pick, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and then they go out and get Darnell Mooney as well. You're giving Kirk Cousins everything he could ever want in an offense. I think he's going to unlock this offense, and they instantly, I think, become the best team in that division.
I think that's the main takeaway from this one. And when I was looking at the move from Minnesota to Atlanta, I don't know how much better his team is in Atlanta than his team is in Minnesota, because in Minnesota, he had Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson and Jordan Addison. It's not like he's seen some massive upgrade in weapons. It's more that the weapons now in Atlanta are going to be able to thrive, whereas previously they were struggling. But the main takeaway is now he moves from a division with Jordan Love, Jared Goff, and that loaded Detroit Lions team, probably Caleb Williams coming in now, into a division that is just very, very lackluster and was one of the worst group of 4 teams in the NFL last year. And I think that's why you see now a clear path to not only a playoff game, but a home playoff game in Atlanta. And I think that's really exciting, the chance to be division favorites once again, because we haven't seen this since the days of, Julio Jones and Matt Ryan and Devontae Freeman coming in. So exciting times in Atlanta, and I'm pumped to see Kirk Cousins respond. Maybe he's the favorite for comeback player of the year if he puts together a big season. But we'll go to Minnesota now because Kirk Cousins is out. They bring in Sam Darnold, and they also make a very intriguing draft trade, which we'll touch on a little bit later in the show. But what do you make of the Sam Darnold signing?
I was going to say, I think you kind of have to talk about that when you're talking about Darnold, because they've got that extra ammo now to move up in the draft, and probably more ammo than the Broncos or Raiders do, unless they want to just offer even more future first-round picks into whatever pitch they have for a New England or an LA or even Arizona if they kind of plan on moving back if Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't in the picture. So I think that's very interesting that they made that trade with the Texans after signing Darnold, because let's face it, Darnold's not the long-term solution, but 1 year of Darnold and maybe the 4th quarterback off the board if it's J.J. McCarthy, and I kind of like that. Not throwing him into the fire immediately. Darnold has some kind of familiarity as well with the Kevin O'Connell, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan tree of offenses being in San Francisco last year. And he's never really had a fair shake in the NFL. The Jets teams were just so porous, and they never surrounded him in a situation that he could thrive. So I'm actually really excited if he is the starter for the first year, or if he is the starter for the entire year rather, to see what he can do with that offense, because it's exciting. Like, it's Justin Jefferson, like you said, it's Hawkinson, it's Jordan Addison. These guys are great players, and I think Darnold kind of, he's got talent. Like, he was drafted high for a reason. So maybe this unlocks something in him that leads him to another team down the road. What do you think of the deal?
I think that's the key with Sam Darnold is, let's not forget, 2018 draft, it was a shock that he wasn't first overall. Like, this was a guy that was brought into the league very, very highly touted and praised for sort of those raw tools, ideal athleticism, arm talent for the modern day quarterback. And he went into a New York situation where not only did he not have any weapons, the defense wasn't all that great, inconsistencies at head coach, just zero stability. And we tend to see that when that happens with a young player, they don't succeed. And his stock now has almost improved, that he's gone into a team like San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan, just a team that can churn out talented young players. He sits as a backup, and now it's almost like the way we all view him is better than when he was a starter. So I think there's a lot of optimism with Sam Darnold, and I think the Vikings, in terms of the moves that they made on the defense side of the ball, they will compete for this NFC North. I think it's going to be one of the funnest divisions to monitor this year. But if I were a Vikings fan, I'd be excited both about the present, because you have a ton of talented players, and I think Darnold can get the most out of this team, and also the future with, I mean, it's not official, but we're all kind of holding our breath waiting for this big trade. We'll talk about another big trade, and this is maybe the most intriguing part. It's what the Pittsburgh Steelers did. Their quarterback room moves from Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, and Mitch Trubisky to Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Imagine saying that sentence a year ago, and all it costs them is a $1 million contract for Russell Wilson and a conditional 6th-round pick for Justin Fields. Are the Steelers offseason winners, or are we going to have to wait to see how these quarterbacks play?
I have no idea. Like, I'm fascinated by it because I think it's the only move you could have made if you're the Steelers to get better in that position. Like, Kenny Pickett obviously wasn't the guy. I'm also fascinated now that Justin Fields is in the fold. How long is Russ's leash? Like, legitimately, if 5 weeks into the season he's not playing great, are you going to Fields? Are you riding this out? I don't know. And if you're the Steelers, how do you view Fields? Because you got to pay him after this season.
Unless you take his option, but that is also $25 million guaranteed. It's really fascinating, and I think they were probably the best landing spot for Fields once the Falcons filled their need, once the Raiders kind of said that they're out on him, and obviously Minnesota, I couldn't see them doing that within the division. But it's very interesting in the case of Justin Fields, how he's viewed as a quarterback by the public, by the media, and we're starting to learn how he's viewed by NFL GMs, going for just a 6th-round pick. It can become a 4th if he plays 51% of the snaps for the Steelers this season. But the Steelers, like, this is Pittsburgh we're talking about. This is a winning franchise, and you mentioned the leash. They haven't had a losing season since 2003, and Mike Tomlin is just, it's inevitable. He's going to win 9-10 games no matter who's back there. So if Russ stutters early, I don't know. Maybe you take a chance. I think Fields is going to see time regardless in the red zone.
So
I think they'll create some unique packages where he can use his legs and his athleticism. I think they got to make some moves at receiver to really complement these guys and put them in a better position to succeed. But I'm excited to watch the Pittsburgh Steelers next year. And I talked about this streak of winning seasons that they've had. They went out and they got the 2 quarterbacks who have 2 of the 3 worst winning percentages since 2021 to help keep this streak alive. I think they have it in them to win 9-10 games, be a playoff team next year. I think this is an upgrade on what they had a year before, but there is that element of uncertainty big time with these moves.
It's almost like Mike Tomlin is just challenging himself now to be like, okay, how low can I go as far as who can we bring in that I can still have a winning season with? It's just like adding to his lore and his Hall of Fame resume. I'm intrigued, and I think everyone else watching is going to be intrigued by this.
I'm very excited to see how this all plays out. We'll have plenty of more discussion of NFL free agency coming up later in the show. We'll see you then.